Hi everyone, this is FIDE Master Dennis Monokroussos, and this is our second attempt to record this, and I believe it should be just fine this time. So we're going to take a look today at a very fun variation that we can try against the French defense. It's one that I first learned of, gosh, I don't know, about 20, 21, 22 years ago, when New in Chess magazine did a profile article on the German FM Stefan Bucher. And Bucher is a guy who plays all kinds of crazy, bizarre, avant-garde, let's say, variations, and has done so with pretty decent success over the years, at least enough that he's developed a reputation for himself as a kind of a wild man of the opening. So anyway, all that I was able to see from the article in terms of this variation I'm going to show you is this. So e4, e6, and now he plays c4. And the standard move here is, of course, to play d5, though moves like c5 are also playable. It just leads in a different direction. Okay, and now not e takes d5 followed by d4, which would just transpose into a fairly simple line of the exchange French, simple from black's perspective trying to defend. But instead, c takes d5, e takes d5, and now queen to b3. Now this is as far as the article went, and but I was intrigued by this, so I decided to have some fun with it. And there were no databases over the years, so I couldn't look up any Bucher games. So essentially, the analysis and the ideas that you're going to see in this presentation are ones that I came up with. Now, I'm sure that many of these are ones that he's utilized as well, but it might be interesting to look him up. I mean, maybe he has a bit of a different spin on these lines. At any rate, what we're going to look at today are some of the positive things that can result for white in this variation. Next week, we'll take a look at what could be its darker side. So at the end of the day, I think that this is a variation that you want to be a little bit careful in using. I mean, you certainly don't want to play it in a correspondence game. And if you have reason to think that your opponents are preparing for you and they have access to good computers, then you don't want to try it. But in blitz games, I think even in some rapid games against certainly players under 2,000, you can certainly get away with this. And I was willing to play this against just about anybody for a number of years. But nowadays, I mean, I'd say if someone prepares for it, it's probably not an ideal weapon. But anyway, see for yourself. Definitely try it out in blitz. Give it a try, and I think you'll enjoy it. And I think as a surprise weapon every now and then, it's probably okay. All right. Well, anyway, let's look. Watch this show. Try it in blitz. Watch next week's show, and then you can decide for yourself. Okay. So what I want to start off with are several of my blitz games with this against pretty strong players around my strength, and you'll see that there's a kind of a very natural path for black, and it's a path that leads to destruction, which is wonderful for us when we're playing white. So let's have a look at a first one here. Okay, so my opponent took on e4. Why not? Okay, bishop c4. Now this, I'm sure, is part of Bucher's basic idea as well. So we develop a second piece, and of course we're hitting the pawn on f7. So black wants to find some way of defending it. Now a move I don't think I cover, but that really should be mentioned, is knight h6. And on this, we'll play d3 with the idea of simply taking on h6 and then taking on f7. Okay, so queen e7 is the move that occurred in this game. You'll see this a pretty high percentage of the time. And okay, so the strong point of this move, of course, is it protects the pawn. It also protects the e4 pawn in advance, and that's useful because white often follows up with knight c3, as I did in this game. Now, a drawback to queen e7, obviously, is that it steps on the bishop f8's toes, but we'll see that there's maybe another drawback to it as well. Okay, now here, black is faced with knight to d5, and so the two moves that you'll see here are either c6, which we'll discuss a little bit later on, and of course knight to f6, and that's what my opponent played, knight f6. Now here's one of the kind of the neat ideas in this variation. So of course White needs to develop some more pieces, otherwise he's simply down a pawn for basically nothing. So here's the first move, d3. Now, while it's natural and obvious to develop pieces, it looks like there's a problem with this because black takes en passant, going 2 pawns up, and after bishop to e3, okay, black can play d2 check and thwart white's desire to castle. However, as we'll see, both of these moves, or both bishop to e3 and the move that I played here, have their drop of poison. Okay, so king to f1 is what I played in this earlier game. I think actually bishop to e3 may be the better move, but king f1 is certainly the more thematic move, and what I would start off with as you try this in your own games. Okay, well now my opponent played knight b to d7, and here I played bishop to g5. And now I think we can finally see, at least get a first glimpse, of what white is really up to here. Alright, now the most obvious threat here is rook to e1. Oh, my mouse is being a little bit funny here. Okay, so rook to e1, which just picks off the queen. So that's obviously a pretty nice main point. There's also the threat of playing knight to d5 as well. So white's pieces are really starting to jump here into the black position. And now you can see that black's development is a little bit goofy here. So he's got 3 pieces out, but one is pinned. Okay, so this guy's pinned. This one is in danger of simply being lost on the e file. The other knight on d7. Okay, it's not badly placed. The bishops are stuck in their home squares. The rooks are stuck in their home squares, and black's king is also not ideally placed on e8. So black is in fact still alright here, but it's the kind of position where black can lose almost immediately, and in fact he just about does. So his first move is okay. He plays knight to c5. I played queen to a3, and here, well, we'll get to this later on, but black can still survive. Unfortunately, not for me, but for him, he played a natural but not very good move. So he plays queen to e5, hitting the bishop. So this hits the bishop. He'd like to maybe bring this guy out so he can castle. He's kind of uncovering the bishop f8's path to my queen, so there might be some annoying variation where he takes advantage of that, for example with perhaps knight c to e4, hitting the bishop and again discovering the attack of my queen. And all of this at least seems, for a first glance, to be problematic. But, as we'll see, my threats come in first. So, rook to e1. Here he played knight f to e4 instead. And, okay, now I played knight to f3. So, not knight takes e4, knight e4, and here, maybe I'm still okay here too, but it seemed to me better not to uncover his bishop on f8. So I played knight f3. He played queen f5. And here you might want to take a moment and see what you can come up with here. I think there are at least a couple of very good moves for me here. And in fact, I probably only played the second best move, but it was still kind of a neat idea, I thought. So stop the recording and give it a try. Quick little tactical exercise here. Okay, well the best move here is the one that I unfortunately did not play. So it's knight takes e4, knight e4, queen a4 check, and now whether he plays c6 or bishop to d7 will come to the same thing. So c6, rook takes e4, check, queen e4, bishop f7 check, and then queen takes e4 winning. So that would have won a piece for, I don't know, what is it, a rook? Yeah, piece for a rook, pretty good deal. So it would have been winning easily. All right, what I played gave him a way out. I played bishop takes d3. He played knight takes d3. I played queen a4 check. And here, if he plays c6, I'm certainly much better, but I don't think I have the immediate knockout. So I probably played rook takes e4. Let me see. Yeah, rook e4, then bishop to e6, and it looks like he's okay here. At least still kicking for sure. So definitely knight takes e4 a couple of moves ago would have been better. So instead he played bishop to d7, of course rook e4 check. And now, I mean, this is of course what I had hoped for. He can't block with his bishop on e6 because it's currently pinned. So he's going to lose at least 2 pieces here and resign. So you can see, though, I mean, already you just go back to this position here after, let's say, knight f3. And, I mean, all of my pieces are just running all over the place, and he's tied down. His king is vulnerable. His knight on the e-file is vulnerable. His queen is vulnerable. So, and this happened by his making just a series of very natural moves. So that's what we're hoping for with this variation, is that we can take advantage of Black just making logical moves. So Black isn't doing anything crazy here. It's just kind of going with the flow. So he takes one pawn, he takes a second pawn. The next thing you know, if he doesn't respond very accurately, he's just dead. So let's take a look at a second game, and we'll see that this game wasn't really a coincidence or just a fluke. All right, so here we go. Same first 4 moves. Same 5th move. And now Black varies with queen at f6. And this sometimes, you'll see this sometimes too. It's not as common as queen to e7, or queen at e7 even, I think. But this is another regular important move. And Black is hoping to play queen to g6, where it'll protect the e-pawn as well as the f-pawn, but would do so without putting the queen where it's vulnerable on the e-file, and also doesn't block the bishop on f8, and the knight can come to f6, and he's also hitting g2. So this looks like just a really wonderful multi-purpose move here for Black. All right, well, I continued with the standard recipe here, knight to c3, aiming at the e-pawn and also the d5 square. Okay, so Black plays queen to g6, so he's sidestepping the knight to d5 threat in advance. So that way, if I were to play knight to d5, in addition to maybe being able to play queen takes g2, he can simply play bishop to d6. Excuse me. And, of course, he's also protecting the e4 pawn. So here I used to play in this position bishop to d5. So that was my original thought about how to play this, with the idea that, okay, if he plays queen to g2, I can play bishop takes e4, covering my rook on h1, while simultaneously hitting b7. So kind of a funny little example of turnaround is fair play there. But instead of queen takes g2, I'm trying to remember what I didn't like about this variation. So there was some concrete problem that led me to give this way of handling the position up. Alright, maybe it's just something like, no, I was thinking knight c6, bishop e4, bishop f5, but then he takes and plays queen b7, so that's clearly not it. Knight to d5 tricks don't seem to be anything too special. So I'm not sure. let me give one more quick thought here, see if I can recollect it. All right, maybe it just is. Let's see. This is annoying. All right, maybe something like just this: c6, bishop e4, and then queen to e6. Yeah, okay, this looks pretty plausible. So if the queen leaves, if white doesn't trade queens, then of course f5 is a big problem. And if white does trade queens, well, then Black just has a perfectly safe position, and white has an Isolani without any real compensation for it. So this is probably why I gave up bishop to d5. So some tricks there. I mean, as you see, it took me a minute or so to remember what it is that Black should do against it, but ultimately Black does have adequate defense without too much trouble. So he does have one hurdle to jump over, but if he does, then that's sort of the end. So the move that I switched to was knight g to e2 here. Again, inviting him to, well, he can take, but then I play bishop takes f7, and then I follow up with rook to g1, and then I take the knight on g8. So that's no good for Black. So Black plays bishop to d6 here, and it looks like everything is just peachy keen here. Now, again, white can maybe consider bishop to d5, But what I like to play here, though maybe bishop to d5 is worth consideration. This might not be such a bad move here. But what I've been playing is d3. And again, like in the previous game, there's probably nothing wrong with black taking, but it again introduces a sort of flow to the game where all of white's moves become quite natural, and if black goes along with white's momentum, with what seem to be the most obvious moves, he can get into big, big trouble again. Alright, so black took on d3 again. What could be more natural than this? Just goes up a couple of pawns here. Alright, knight f4. Well, we don't want to move the queen again. At least, there's kind of this feeling, I think, that players with black have in these positions that, alright, well, I've already moved the queen a couple of times. If I move it a third time, then I'm just giving up too many tempi to my opponent. So he took. Alright, but this helps white because we're getting rid of one of his bishops. It's helping our development. Black is kind of undeveloping. And now white is just ready to castle, put the second rook on the central file, and white's pieces are just firing away full blazes here, while black's king is vulnerable and is not developed. And so white's going to have tremendous compensation. I mean, even if black castles, white takes the d pawn. He's just one pawn down with very active pieces and tremendous prospects. So black decided to play d2, thinking to either undevelop my bishop, put it on the kind of crummy d2 square, and to block the file, or, of course, to prevent me from castling. But as we saw in the last game, white often really doesn't mind moving his king if it'll help to bring his rooks into the action. So I played king takes d2, and now my rook is ready to come to e1 with mayhem here. Okay, so black played knight to c6, trying to develop here, and maybe hoping to play something like knight to a5 or knight to d4. But again, we'll see that black is just far too slow here. Okay, so I played knight to d5, trying to gain a tempo here with the threat of knight takes c7. Right, black played king to d8. I played knight takes c7, and now knight to f6. So a very interesting idea from my opponent. He's perfectly happy to give up this rook in the corner, but in return to try to get his own kind of nasty attacking chances here, starting with maybe knight to e4 check, and perhaps the other knight will come to d4, maybe queen takes g2. So all of a sudden, maybe I've got a little bit to worry about. So I mean, I could probably get away with this, I suspect, but still, maybe black can get a little play here. So I decided that I'm going to try to maintain my own attack here and not go for material. And I think that's certainly the right attitude to have when you play this variation. So you can't worry about a pawn or two, and sometimes you even need to be a little bit more generous than that. So, whoops. So I'm ready to I'm ready to castle by hand here with king to c1. So both bringing my own king into complete safety while continuing to hammer away at his king, which is very exposed. All right, so he played bishop to g4, which is quite a good move, I think. Both attacking my rook and seeming to give himself a little time, and also hoping, obviously, to get his king to the c8 square and some potential safety on that location. So, for that reason, I played queen takes b7, giving him the chance to save his rook with rook to b8. The knight protects it, and I can't take the knight on. Well, maybe I can take the knight on c6, though it's I'm not sure about this. Okay, the problem with this is not knight to e4, which looks at first very strong because it's discovered check and winning the queen. But the problem with that is that I play king to c1 and I'm discovering check right back, and I'm sure this is going to lead to a very quick mate. So the real problem with queen takes c6 is, I think, rook takes b2 check, and now, okay, maybe I'm all right here, but it looks kind of scary at any rate. But yeah, maybe this is the same thing. Maybe this is just as meaningless because of the discovered check. So let's say king e3. I don't know, king c1. All right, let's try king c1, which looks like the most dangerous thing. I mean, if it wasn't check, it would be queen to c2 mate, but it's check. So bishop takes, rook takes, Yeah, okay, he's losing here too. So it looks like everything is just winning for white. So I simply played king to c1 check. My opponent took the exchange and I recaptured. And I calculated this out anyway, so wasn't too worried. If he plays knight to d7, okay, maybe I hadn't calculated this completely perfectly here. Brother. Okay, what do I do here? Maybe I have to play knight to e6 check. Okay, no, that's right. Knight e6. And, yeah, I mean, of course, if he plays pawn takes, I have queen takes d7 mate. And if he plays queen takes e6, well, then I can play queen c7 check first, and then I take on e6. And then he's just losing all kinds of goodies here. All right, so that's right. So I'm simply winning here. But he played king to e7, which materially is perhaps the best move, but I think I'm just mating him by force here, or just taking just about everything on the board. So, again, take a moment and see if you can figure out what white's move ought to do. Again, probably there's a lot of things that are fine. I mean, queen takes c6 should be just fine. But what I came up with here was knight to d5 check. Now, probably he should play king to e6. Well, king to e6, knight to e3 is devastating. So he played king to f8, and now this was the idea that I had in mind. Bishop to d6 check, king g8, and knight to e7 check. And here he resigned, because if he takes on e7, queen takes b8, and it's mate in 2 after he throws away both knights. While if king to f8, of course I play knight takes g6, double check, and I'm just, well, this is mate next move, or very quick mate anyway, because I've got queen f7 coming as well. So a very, again, quick and crushing win for white. And, you know, even as early as maybe move 12, move 13, I had just a whole series of ways that I could try to win and succeed as well. And again, black didn't do anything really all that obviously wrong. I mean, just one natural move after another. And by the time we got here, I mean, black is already on the verge of death. So it's quite a dangerous line. All right, let's take a look at a third game here. Okay, and this one shows a third possibility here for black, which is not to capture on e4 at all, but to decline it. And there are two main ways of declining it. There's knight to f6, which is what happened in the game, and there's c6, which is also a move that I see pretty regularly. A third move, which I see not very often, but it does show up from time to time, is knight to c6. But this is just a mistake, because after e takes d5, the intended move, knight to d4, just loses the knight to queen to a4 check. So be aware of that little trick. All right, so c6 we'll discuss in a few minutes, but let's start with knight to f6, which is what happened in this game. Okay, now here I played knight to c3. Yeah, this was a move. Knight to f6 was a move that took me quite a while to figure out the best way to face. And I'll present a little bit more of the theory behind this later on. But for now, I'll just show this third blitz game of mine. So knight to c3, which I think is best. d4. And now the best move here, I think, is bishop to c4. And I'll talk about this later. But e5 is what I played. So dc, ef, takes. And now here black should play queen takes f6. And so white has some compensation after knight to f3, or maybe bishop to c3. But whether it's enough or not is really not so clear. In fact, black can just play queen e6 check and swap off the queen. So maybe bishop to c4 is perhaps the best move here. Yeah, bishop c4, and then knight f3, bishop c3, stuff like that. Okay, so instead, though, for some reason my opponent played g takes f6, and I have no idea why, but again, it was a quick win, so we'll just present this, and it had a cute little finish. So knight f3, bishop d6, bishop c4, queen e7 check, and once again, old faithful, king f1. Alright, so threats to play rook to e1 and win some material. So my opponent played king f8, I played rook e1, queen d7, and alright, see if you can figure out the fastest win for white. So this isn't too tough, but it's a cute little tactic. So hopefully you guys all solved it within 5 seconds, let's say. So the answer is bishop h6, and now bishop takes f7. You can see rook to e8 would be really nice to play, because bishop f8, rook takes f8's mate, the king can't go anywhere, but there's the problem of queen takes e8. So what we have to do is put the queen out of commission, and that's what bishop takes f7 check is for. And now rook to e8, bishop f8, rook f8 mate. Okay, so a simple little game there, and of course g takes f6 is not really doctor prescribed, but still, I mean, it doesn't look like white should just win in 7 more moves here, but that's what happened in the game. All right, so white's, the attack that white can build up in these lines, as we see, is quite dangerous, especially in a blitz game. All right, well, let's look at a little bit of theory here. And we'll start with this last variation. Okay, so knight f6. Now, as I said, I had a difficult time figuring out what to do here over the years. So the first thing that I tried was e5, which looks pretty natural, and it's not bad, but I think it leads to more normal positions, and black should probably be okay here. So knight to e4, and then here I tried d3 and wasn't really so excited about that, and I tried d4, but here I think with either simply c5, accepting the isolated pawn but gaining good piece play in return, or with knight to c6, and then bishop to b4 check, it's clear that black's development is very natural, and while I've got this slight advantage in space in the center, well, a slight advantage in terms of pawn activity in the center, maybe not space in general, black's pieces all just get to such good squares that I think white's chances for an advantage are not that great. I mean, I should say, I think that's maybe a little bit too pessimistic. I mean, I think it's a position that's complicated enough that the better player will win, but theoretically speaking, I think black should be fine. Instead of d4, which makes the pawn a little bit of a target, another idea is to play knight to f3. Okay, and here I think black can just play something like c6, and then queen to b6, and this seems to me to be equal form as well. So it's, the problem for white is that, I mean, I really can't restrict any of his pieces. So even though I've got these nice-looking pawns on d4 and e5, they look nice, but every one of his pieces can kind of work around them. And even at some point, you can consider a move like f6, let's say if the queens come off, and just undermine the e5 pawn as well. So I think this promises very little for white. Really, it's equal. Okay, so e5 is nothing, really. One cute idea I had at one point was d3 with a double idea. So it keeps his knight off of e4. So in other words, now I am maybe threatening to play e5, and after the knight moves wherever, d7, g4, or g8, who knows. Well, then I can play d4, and I don't have to worry about his knight going to the e4 square. So that was kind of the clever idea behind this. And there's a little tactile justification as well, which I got to display a couple times in blitz games, where if black plays knight takes e4, it's not queen to e3 it's the problem, but queen to a4 check, and the knight goes. All right, so that's the idea behind it, but it looks like black is fine with a move like bishop to c5. So just getting on with his own development, and not cooperating with my plans. All right, so you can see that white can get into trouble here too. All right, so knight to f3, castles, and now I've got to worry already about moves like knight takes e4 or knight to g4 hitting f2, and I have no attack here at all, and my pieces are the ones that are kind of discombobulated. All right, so bishop to d3 looks natural, protecting the e-pawn and preparing castling, so I don't have to worry about f2. Okay, but black can just keep developing as well. Knight to c6 is quite good, and even the rather testing bishop to e6 might be the best move. All right, so for example, if I go greedy here with queen takes b7, I'm just going to get killed. Queen d3, queen a8, knight e4, and white is just in a world of hurt here. Black is threatening bishop takes f2 mate, is also threatening bishop to d5, winning the white queen, And so this is probably already time for white to resign here. Okay, if instead I play a move like queen to c3, hitting the bishop, well, black can play knight to c6, threatening bishop to b4. And if I play queen takes c5, then simply queen takes d3. And again, the white king is kind of vulnerable. The e-pawn is hanging. I have to worry about maybe bishop to c4. So this really isn't a lot of fun. Okay, so all of this just goes to show that white has some problems to solve here. So e5 doesn't work, and d3 doesn't work. So that's how I came across knight c3. Now, first of all, if d takes e4, I play bishop to c4, and if queen to e7, d3, and we're hitting a position that we've already reached in the first game that I presented. Okay. Secondly, if black plays c6, we get to a kind of position that I'll discuss in a couple of minutes. So finally, though, there's the move d4. Well, what about this? Well, we saw the last game where I played e5, and alright, that maybe has something going for it, but the best move here is bishop to c4. And this move actually, I don't think I came up with this. There was a student that I showed this line to, and I think he played it either here or in a very similar position, and so it showed that his instincts were better than mine. So this was the way to go. And this actually is a completely sound sacrifice here, and I think white has excellent chances. Even against best play, I think it ends up being about unclear, and best play for black, unless he's prepared this in advance, is just about impossible. So I'll show you a typical variation here. Okay, so d takes c3, bishop f7, king e7, e5, and now white is, I think, better at this point. All right, so black can either try to return the material and catch up in development and hope that he can neutralize white's attack, or just grab the material, hold on to it, and hang on for dear life. So let's see knight to c6. I think this is probably the better way to go, frankly. Okay, so knight c6, and now b takes c3. So we don't have to recapture the knight right away, but we're incorporating this really big threat of bishop to a3, which is, well, just wins the queen. And knight takes e5 doesn't stop anything. Knight takes e5, bishop a3 check still. Because if, well, let's just take a quick look. Knight e5, bishop a3, king d7, queen to e6 mate. So that's why black has to cough up the queen here with queen to d6. And that'll do it. Actually, wait a minute. Oops. Am I making a big mistake here? Here, and now black has the c7 square. Okay, so we can do this, but we regain the piece, and black's king is still rather exposed. So, okay, this may be playable. This may be playable for black. So what's the body count? All right, so white ends up a pawn ahead, but maybe black has a little bit of compensation. All right, so maybe it's not quite 100% clear, but all right, if white's ending up a pawn ahead, it's probably not too bad either. Okay, but it may be playable, so let's give it that. All right, another possibility is queen to d3 here, and I think white's only a teeny bit better in this position as well. So bishop a3, king d8, take the knight, swap these guys off, trade queens off. I mean, white's king is in a little bit of potential danger here, so queen trade's probably not such a bad idea. And again, white's up one pawn, but black will have reasonable chances. I mean, you can see that this bit of white structure is a little bit funny. I mean, the pawns are themselves a little bit loose, and maybe the d3 square could be a problem at some point. So white's advantage is minimal. I mean, black definitely has some compensation for the pawn. Okay, still, in both of those lines that we just saw, it was probably better to have white than black there. All right. If black tries to keep his piece, then we'll see bad things happen. So d4, threatening bishop to g5 check. And now if c takes b2, bishop to g5 check. Again, the king can't move because queen to e6 is mate. like that. So knight f6, and now just rook to b1. So no rush to take the knight on f6. Take it next move, and here white's clearly better. So he's going to regain the piece. Black's king is in some trouble, and yeah. So no knockout blow here, but a very good position for white. So that's what happens on c takes b2. If black plays queen takes d4, it looks, at least for a moment, like white might be in trouble because, okay, materially black is fine. Bishop to g5 check doesn't win the queen anymore. Black is hoping to play king to d8. He's also hitting f2, also hitting e5 this way. But white's just in time. So bishop to g5 check, not letting the king run back to safety. Again, king to d7, queen e6 mate. So black has to give up the knight. And now knight f3. Okay, so we kick the queen, and we protect the e5 pawn, develop a piece. And here's the nicest variation. So c takes b2, and we just ignore it. So we castle. And again, white's development is really just ideal now. Black takes, makes a new queen. We take one of them. Now we take the knight. Now we play rook to e1 check. And the funny thing is that black has to start giving up even more material. All right, if he plays king to d8, then it's mate in 2. And if king to d6, white has a nice move here. So see if you can figure out what white to play, what white to move ought to play here. Rook to d1 is a very natural move, and probably not bad. But maybe after rook to d1, black can simply trade and play king to e7. And it looks like one of the bishops is going to fall, and after that, I mean, black is going to have 2 rooks and 2 pieces for the queen. So that's not really the ideal continuation for white. It's not really winning much material that way. So the best move here is bishop takes f6. And if the queen runs away someplace, well, then, he has to be careful where he runs away too. Because, let's say he, we'll see in a minute why. If he plays queen to d2, now I think rook to d1 is quite good. So queen takes, there's no king to e7 here, and white can follow up with bishop takes h8, assuming there's no mate. There might just be a forced mate. So after bishop f6, materially speaking, black pretty much has to take on f6. But now, queen to d5 mate. So that's the big idea here. And again, we saw that black is making a series of moves, all of which are fairly natural, but white's initiative and his development is so superior that it ends in catastrophe for black. And really, at the end of the day, that's to be expected when you see all of these pieces sitting on the back rank doing absolutely nothing to help the king. All right, so one more bit of theory here, and then we'll call it a show. And next week we'll see what black can do in response. Excuse me. Okay, so c6. This is another important line, and again, it's one that I see pretty regularly when I try this. Okay, so e takes d5, c takes d5, and now here it's a little move order issue. So d4 I kind of give as the main line, but maybe knight to c3 is the best way to handle this. And it also gives you a little trick too, because if d4, then here too, this bishop to c4 idea is possible. I'm not 100% sure about this, but okay, queen e7 check. We can just play this, and this is probably okay. So again, we'll try to clear the file as fast as possible. I don't think I can get away with king to d1 here, though maybe it's worth looking at. So let's see, d takes c3, knight f3, and once again, we're hoping for rook to e1. So I don't know. I mean, I kind of doubt it, but you never know. It might be worth a try. All right, maybe black should play something like c2 check, just to well, 2 reasons. So one is to prevent white from getting his bishop out easily. Secondly, if queen takes c2, then it eases the pressure on f7 and also allows black to play bishop to e6. And finally, if king takes c2, then bishop to f5 check. But actually, maybe that's okay, because then we play d3, and we keep our focus on e6 and f7, and there's also b7. Bishop's ready to come to g5. There's rook to e1. So this is what I mean. I mean, you can the white pieces come streaming out. Black is making these natural moves. So c2. I mean, I kind of fell for it there myself, maybe. So it looks really logical, and the bishop comes out with check. What could be better? Well, as we see, it's not so clear. All right, maybe black can play this clever knight to c6 now, with the idea that, okay, if rook to e1, queen takes e1, and then knight to d4 check. All right, so I don't know. Maybe this is okay. Can also try bishop to g5 though, and then the rooks will be self-protecting, so we don't have to move the knight from f3. But again, well, okay, queen takes g5, and then queen takes b7. All right, knight to b4 check. Okay, let's just look at it a little bit. So king to b3. And now, all right. Well, it can't move the rook because queen takes. Can't play rook to d8 because the queen takes f7 mate. All right, so let's say rook to c8. Then the queen's hanging, of course, always too. So yeah, so this is a problem for black. I mean, what does he do? He plays queen to d8. Obviously, he's getting mated like that. So a lot of entertainment value in these positions, as you can see. And if you have a good feeling for the initiative, you can make some nice things happen. All right, so yeah, we've added to the theory of this variation a little bit. Okay, so anyway, see that d4 is certainly not going to lead to a safe and tame position, if that was black's intention. So knight c3, knight f6, and now d4, and that'll just transpose to the main line here. Okay, so anyway, going back to it this way, d4. Okay, knight f6, knight c3 is what we just saw, and we'll continue with that in a minute. Just wanted to show one other possibility. If black plays knight to c6, we should play bishop to b5. Okay, so pin the knight straight away there. Okay, so back to this. Knight c6, sorry, knight f6, knight c3, bishop b7. Okay, and here we want to make sure we play bishop to b5 check. So if we wait till black castles, of course, then bishop to b5 just looks ridiculous. So it's important to play it before black is castled. So knight to c6, knight f3, castles. Okay, and now here some more accuracy is required, because black's move can play bishop to g4, and bishop takes f3 could be annoying. So we want to be able to meet bishop to g4 with knight to e5. So the right move here is to play bishop takes c6, and after b takes c6, here too we need to be accurate and castle. Alright, because if we do something else, black could play bishop to a6, and I think I allowed this once, and I was very unhappy in that game. I don't remember if I lost, but I was sure scrambling around, and life wasn't good. So, important to castle here right away. Not play knight to e5 or bishop f4. Okay, so now let's say bishop to d6. I mean, there are a variety of things that black can play here. Basically, what I'll tell you is just what white intends. So white wants to play the knight to e5, this bishop to f4, this knight comes to a4, and then either rook to c1, or often the queen goes to c2, and then perhaps this knight from a4 is going to go to c5. So white is really going for this big grip on the dark squares. So e5, f4, c5 especially are squares that you can just really get a good handle on and a very strong grip on. And at the end of the day, I mean, white is hoping for some kind of endgame or late middle game where this pawn on c6 is just going to be super weak and fall. And of course, if that falls, then maybe the d5 pawn will drop as well. So very solid position. Black has the bishop here, but this bishop on a6 tends to lack really useful prospects. So one possibility here. Okay, bishop to d6, trying to prevent bishop to f4. Naturally, we take advantage of this and play bishop to g5. Okay, rook to b8, so that's the second point of this. Forces the queen back to c2, but as I mentioned, that's a pretty useful square because it takes aim at this pawn on c6, and it also prevents black's bishop from getting to f5. Okay, so h6, bishop h4. Let's say bishop to e7, hoping to negate that pressure. Okay, well, knight to e5, knight to a4, and all right. I mean, this was maybe a little bit of a cooperative variation, but this is the kind of situation, the kind of position that I get pretty regularly in this variation, where again I've achieved my grip. My knight is on e5. The other knight can go to c5 pretty much whenever I want it to. The rooks are going to go to the c and e files most of the time. And I can also play f3 to keep his knight off of e4. So, very comfortable position. It's a little bit of a switch. I mean, before we had these crazy tactical lines in here, it's a bit calmer, but it's again a position that is very, very easy to play, and one that you should enjoy playing as well. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stop here at this point, and next time we'll take a look at some of the ways that black can respond. And let me just challenge you to try to figure it out yourself. And I think it's a good exercise to try to do that, in part because it's a very useful skill over the board to not kind of get sucked into your opponent's rhythm. Right. So if you watch sports, I mean that I think we're most familiar with it there, where one team, let's say in basketball, tries to exert its style of play on the other team. Well, this happens in chess as well, and that's what we've basically seen in the lines and games we've looked at today, where white has been successful in exerting his style on the board and his kind of flow. So for black to really combat this variation successfully, and he can do it, he has to escape the flow that white is trying to impose. So see if you can figure out how that can be done, and give us a try for white as well. See what successes you can have, and if you have some neat successes, maybe you can comment those in the notes. So I will see you next week. Thank you very much, and enjoy. Bye-bye.